So, Ruben, your new movie, The Square, is really something, just to put it mildly. Uh, First off, how did this movie start? Where did the idea for it come from?
The starting point was actually with this art installation, The Square. That also is an art piece that they are exhibiting in the museum of the film. And I mean, that idea happened because I was making a feature film that was called Play, that was inspired of true events of young boys robbing other young boys in the center of the city where I live in Gothenburg, in Sweden. And I read through the court files when it came to these robberies. And what you could tell was that the bystander effect was very, very strong. You know, that the adults that were around these kids when these robberies took place, they didn't interact. They didn't try to stop the robberies. And in this context, me and a friend of mine came up with the idea that we should create a symbolic place where we are reminded about our common responsibility. And for an example, this symbolic place could be used as, if you need help, if you are in a public space, you can go and stand in this square. And then it's my obligation as a person, if I'm passing by, to address this person and ask them, okay, sorry, I can see that you're standing in the square. How can I help you? This was actually how the whole idea started. And then when I made a film that was called Force Majeure, and it was, I had like the promo tour of it, and I was starting to think about what should the next project be. I thought it was something about this idea with the square that I couldn't let go. So I started to write a script around responsibility, about like trust, about on how we look on the social contract, on how we behave towards each other. And yeah, that was the starting point.
Taking all of those different themes, how did you, I guess, arrive at the story of the film through the writing process? I mean, did you find a story that could encapsulate all these different themes you were wanting to explore?
It was very hard. I can tell you, it was. It has. I mean, these themes have so many layers to it. There's so many aspects of it that is important in order to create, to make something that makes sense. That at least that was my feeling. But I decided that I was trying to use myself as a role model for the main character, since I believe that I'm a person that believes in humanistic beliefs, that most of us do, actually, and I think that they are great, you know. But what I wanted was to have a character that believe in those things, but at the same time are challenged. So I was looking for a setup in situations where I felt that me myself would be challenged. Me myself would have a problem to actually be a good human being in these situations, in order to try to highlight these themes from a complex perspective on a behavioristic point of view. So I decided to have a male main character that is the chief curator of the museum, where the film takes place quite much. And and he is having his next exhibition with this idea about the square. And at the same time, he's challenged in his own life because he gets his cell phone and his wallet stolen by a robbery on a scam on the street. And these two things are taking place like two parallel lines in the film. What's going on in the museum, and at the same time, what's going on in his private life.
The film is also very absurdly comic. I mean, there's some truly bizarre things that happen to this guy just from the very simple premise of his phone and wallet getting stolen. Can you talk a bit about, I guess, coming up with and sort of pushing the boundaries a bit of the sort of absurd things that happen to this guy that really challenge him?
Well, I think that a lot of the situations that is happening to the character of Christian have happened in my own life.
All right.
Not the condom scene, though. The condom scene actually happened to a friend of mine. And so, but I think that, you know, when I'm collecting ideas, I think I do it in a kind of similar way as stand-up comedian is working. You can tell that a stand-up comedian, they constantly is trying out their material on other people when they meet them. And it's a lot about what kind of dialogues that you have with your friends. You're talking about things that could be a material for your films. And I think it's the same way for me. You know, when I tell everybody about this is the theme of my next movie, and then I'm telling them about a couple of the scenes in the film. And sometimes someone is telling me a situation they have experienced back, and then immediately, if it's great, then I steal it and put it into the film. And these scenes, I think that they always are in some way, they are connected with a dilemma. We human beings, we can act very absurd when we are trying to deal with a dilemma. And a dilemma, if you look what a dilemma is where you have two or more choices, but none of them are easy. So it's when you detect one of these situations that have this absurdity in it because of the setup. Yeah, that's just the kind of scenes that interests me.
Mm-hmm. Was it difficult finding the right tone for the movie when you were directing it and when you're on set?
Yes, I think it's always very difficult. I think that I want my films to balance on in one moment being comical, and the next moment they can be kind of scary and tragical, and that the film and the scenes is always balancing, not tipping over, being too comical or too tragical, or and I mean that's the big challenge of being a director, I would say. How do you reach your personal expression? How do you reach your voice? And every day when you are on set is a struggle to trying to find the right tone in every scene.
Was there a particular scene that was difficult for you to figure out how to do? Or, I mean, what was the most challenging moment in the movie for you to figure out?
I think, I'm sorry to say, but I think that every day when you are on set, then you are meeting something that you couldn't expect, and you think, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. This scene is not going to work. I don't know how to deal with it. But in the end of the day, hopefully you have reached something that you like. But I can talk about, no, all of the scenes have different challenges, I would say. It's hard to point out the specific scene.
I was just thinking, I mean, of the entire movie, I don't know which one would have given you the most pause, because they are all so incredible. They all seem so incredibly challenging to find the right tone. I wanted to ask you about the cast, starting off with the lead actor, and I'm going to try my best to pronounce his name. Claes Bang, is that?
Very good.
So the whole movie basically rests on his shoulders. What made him right for the role?
Well, when I was doing the casting, I did casting for quite a long time, and I tried English and American, French, Danish, Norwegian, Finnish actors for this film. And I asked them, all the actors that I met, I asked them to do an improv with me. And I also asked them to write a speech about the square, about this installation. And Claes, the first time I met him, then he had written a speech that was very, very beautiful. He was explaining in which way you could use this symbolic place, in which way you could use this art piece. And one way of using it was like to stand in it because you need help, because he said it like this, you know, my father just died and I have no one to talk to. Can you talk to me for half an hour? And it was a very touching moment for me to see that improv. And I thought he did it in, he put emotions into this very conceptual idea. And I think that Claes is a human being that actually his emotions are always present. And he have that ability of keeping his emotions present also when we are shooting. So yeah, I guess that's the reason why I picked him.
You surround him with a large supporting cast, but I wanted to highlight two people who are familiar to audiences in this country, Elisabeth Moss and Dominic West. Can you talk a bit about working with them and putting them into these small but pivotal roles?
I think that I made like impros with Elisabeth and Dominic in London, and I was immediately struck by their skill, their intelligence when it came to relating to a situation and using the setup of that situation. And from the beginning, I didn't have any idea that I wanted to have English-speaking actors in the film. So what they did was actually creating a problem for me. You know, what should I do now? And then I decided that the art world, it is a context in the art world where you allow people to speak different languages. It didn't feel that strange. So I had to give them the parts. That's basically how it happened. And I think both Elisabeth and Dominic, or maybe all actors that I work with, have to get to know my shooting style, because I have quite many days when I'm shooting. In the Square, we had 78 shooting days.
Oh, wow.
And what I do is that I don't want to shoot too many different camera setups on a day. I want us to focus on what's going on in front of the camera instead of moving the camera around all day. And then I do a lot of takes. So I maybe do an average around 25 takes or something like that. And that, what happens then is that if you're an actor, then you have to decide when you should like explode, if you say like that, when your expression should be as strong as possible. And if you have been shooting a lot of TV normal tempo, normal phase productions, then you have maybe an average 5 takes. And those actors that have a lot of experience, they are very focused in doing their best performance in the beginning. But for me, we repeat them over and 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 again. And then in the end of the day, I say, everybody, it's 5 takes left. Now let's try to push up our performance. And then I do a countdown. 4 takes left. Everybody, come on now. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's an important football game to win in the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And the beginning of the day, I used to take risks, to try out things that we wouldn't dare to try out if we only had 5 takes. So it's a different kind of mentality. And I think that both Elisabeth and Dominic adapted to this, but it took a little while before they understood exactly how they should, deal with their own energy and save some energy for later on and so on.
I wanted to ask you about one more person in the cast, Terry Notary, who has one hell of a scene in this movie. Can you talk a bit about working with him? And I mean, because it's such a, just talk a bit about it.
Okay, the scene in itself, the core idea of the scene was that, I mean, we were aiming for Cannes and competition in Cannes with the film, with the Square. And my idea with that scene was that I wanted a tuxedo-dressed audience sitting in the cinema in Cannes, watching another tuxedo-dressed audience at this dinner, dealing with this crazy performance artist. Because I wanted the audience in Cannes to like reflect over themselves and what would I do if I was in that situation. And at first I was thinking of a character that was more similar to the American punk rock artist G.G. Allen. But I didn't find anyone that really could play him. And I was Googling actor imitates monkey on YouTube. And then I found a beautiful YouTube clip of Terry Notary when he's doing a demo for Planet of the Apes. And he has these arm extensions on him. And he says, okay, this is a chimpanzee. And he does it so beautifully. You see immediately, that's a chimpanzee. And then he says, this is the gorilla. And he does a gorilla. And it's like, even a kid can say, wow, that is a great performance. You know? And it's something direct with that style of acting. So I was rewriting the scene then to make this performance artist then a monkey imitator instead. And we were shooting that scene for 4 days. We had 1 day of rehearsal when we was looking at Terry's movement and how we should capture it with the camera. And then we had 3 days of shooting. And I mean, Terry did an extraordinary performance when we were shooting those 3 days. He was putting so much energy into that scene. Every time we did a new take, he had 300 extras looking at him and like actually were a little bit afraid, what will he do? But we had a very precise structure of the scene, and it looks like it's improvised when we were doing the shooting or anything. And yeah, I mean, I really a big shout out to Terry Notary, because I think that his very physical acting is something that we should have to remind ourselves that if we can use it in new and different ways.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Cannes, you did get into the Cannes competition and you won the Palme d'Or for this movie. Can you talk a bit about what that kind of recognition, that award meant for you?
On a personal level, it means that I get to go in economic premium when I'm flying. I can drink Prosecco and I can stay at 4-star hotels. I'm not 5 stars yet, but no, but it's. I mean, you can only be humble when it comes to the Golden Palm, I think, because there are so many great directors that have not won that prize, even though they have done a lot of great films. And you should be lucky, and you should have a good timing if you're going to win it. And it's fantastic. And I mean, the reason that it's interesting with those prizes is, of course, that you get attention as a director. You also get attention to the content of the film. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that you just have to. You have to remind yourself also, you know, because it becomes a normality. It becomes normal, so to speak, quite quickly. But you have to remind yourself it's quite extraordinary.
Well, Ruben, congratulations, and thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.